in construction costs. The first increase in fossil fuel prices had an impact on the wholesale market of electricity, and what happened with construction costs had an impact in transmission works. Nowadays, especially in works that are not new lines, but improvements of existing lines, we are about 2/3 of delay in those works. So about 2/3 of the works related to improving transmission lines are delayed substantially. And on the other hand, we have this huge increase in prices of fossil fuels. That means that any imbalances that occurred in the wholesale market, that happened for some time before too, but now, because of this price gap, the impact on the income of generating companies was huge. So this is similar to what other countries faced, but it was, I think, in Chile was particular because the way in which our bidding system works. We have long-term contracts, and these long-term contracts, in many cases, were not able to reward adequately this risk that companies were facing. Of course, in electricity sector, as in many other segments of the energy industry, policies are rather stable. They all come from a set of instruments that put an anchor in energy policies and force us to look at the long term. Those set of policies. And the one in particular that we are implementing as a government is what we call the second stage on energy transition. And our initial agenda for a second stage on energy transition. Why calling it a second stage? You can see there in this graph the participation of each technology. What you have in the horizontal axis is the year. What you have in the vertical axis is the share for each technology. And as you can see, well, early in the 20th century, our country was heavily dependent on hydropower. Then substantial droughts came in at the end of the century. And then you can see a significant investment in thermoelectrical generation. That created a big problem. I would say two big problems. One, that it's related to the communities in which these facilities are located, because thermoelectrical generation, and particularly coal power plants, create local pollutants, and in those communities, those facilities are hugely resisted. And that's, of course, a political problem. And then it created an exposure to international prices. Chile does not produce coal, does not produce natural gas, does not produce diesel. Then this increase in the generation based on fossil fuels created huge source of risk for the country. Then about 2015, it started the first stage of this energy transition towards clean energy, based mainly on photovoltaic and windmills. That was quite successful, as you can see in the graph. It was quite successful. But solar power and wind power, they are both variable. And then if we want to take away the thermal generation, especially phase out coal, then we need to create, that's a technological challenge. We need to find ways in which clean energy also provides the flexibility that coal power plants give to the system. And that's the center of this second stage of energy transition. And we need to find ways of investing in storage and concentrated solar power. If you see the area of those things together is similar to the area of coal. So in order to get rid of coal, we need to find ways of investing in storage and CSP. That's the plan, and that's what second stage means. In order to implement this second stage initial agenda, there's a lot of things that are going on based on regulation. These are just executive orders. But the heart of our initial stage, initial agenda for the second stage is this energy transition bill that you can find 3 time frames. On the short terms, we need to find ways to give relief to some generators that are having financial stress due to the increase in oil prices. And that's what we call redistribution of congestion rates. That's the short-term measure. In the midterm, we need to increase the investment in storage, and that's why we are pushing a very ambitious agenda to foster investment in storage. And then long-term, from 2030 onwards, then we have new transmission lines coming in, especially Kimallo Aguirre, a big HVDC transmission line that should be in operation by 2030. So those 3 sequential timeframes are the ones that we are trying to build with this energy transition bill. I will go quickly on the 2 main pillars of this transmission line, on this transition bill. The first one is congestion rents. The correlation between this increase in oil prices, this created that the congestion rents also increased substantially. And that means that we have a pocket of funds funded by generators that, according to our current rules, are give back to customers. What we are creating is a different set of rules in which, if this is a normal year, such as 2020, then this entire pocket of congestion rents will be given back to customers. But if it is an extraordinary year, then we will do something different, because extraordinary years require extraordinary measures. And then we will split a little bit this fund. Some of it will go to customers, some of it will go to generators. I could go on the specifics of how this redistribution is done, but the essential idea is that by giving some relief to generators, you can avoid 2 things. First, that bankruptcy that bankruptcy terminates some quite cheap and efficient contracts, that long-term contracts that enable to supply to customers at a very cheap price, and that has that's a cost of about $1. And then that the market concentrates itself, and that our bidding mechanism is less competitive, and that we estimated that it will have a cost of about $3. Allocating some of these rents to generators, we will believe it will have a cost of about 2 cents of a dollar in the electricity bill. So what you are changing is 2 cents for avoiding something in the realm of $4. In terms of cost-benefit analysis, this is a very sound mechanism. On the second hand, the second pillar of the transition bill is related to storage. What we did, it was to study which substations require more storage, and we find 5 of them that have more potential for storage. And what we are doing is in those 5 substation, what we will do is to create a 2 layers bidding mechanism. On the one hand, we will bid the infrastructure, and we will award the infrastructure to the operator with the lowest bid. And then we will create a bidding for storage services. And then that will be funded by generators. And then just the difference between the cost of the infrastructure and the demand for the service, it will be what is paid by the end consumers. According to our calculations, this difference will end up with a plus or minus of, it's less than a cent of a dollar. And what you save just in technical minimums and ancillary service and other lateral payments is more than that. So then again, this is a very sound policy in terms of cost benefit analysis, because it reduces lateral payments, it reduces curtailment, and also, very important, it reduces emissions. We estimate that with this set of storage mechanisms in place, we will be able to avoid, in the window that goes between 2026, which is when these facilities should be in place, and 2030, that it's where our big transmission line should be in place, we will be able to avoid about 11 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions, which is kind of equivalent to a half of what the electric system produces in 1 year. So again, in terms of cost benefits analysis, especially if you are able to internalize the external cost of emission, this is a very sound technical decision. So, and that's the main goal of our energy transition bill. 2 set of policies, both of them are very sound in terms of cost-benefit analysis. One of them addressed to the short-term financial problems that we see some companies are facing, and the other one more to the mid-term lack of investment in storage. We believe that if we put together both of these policies, then the long term of the electric system, it's much more brighter than without them.
Great.
That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Minister. That was really useful.
I was on time.
Yeah. Yeah, really useful introductory scene-setting presentation. So now we're going to move into the panel session. I'm going to give a 2-minute introduction on HSBC and what we're doing, and then we're going to hear from our other 2 guests here, and then we're going to move into the Q&A session. I've got a few questions to start with. I've actually got a lot, but I'll stick it to 1 or 2. And then if we've got time at the end, we can try and take a few from the audience as well. So just on me, I'm Randolph. I'm the head of power systems at HSBC. I sit in our global sustainability team. And my role is to ultimately help the bank and our clients achieve their net zero targets and ambitions. At HSBC, we've set a net zero target for 2050 for all of our financed emissions. And we've also set interim 2030 targets for a range of different sectors. So for example, power and utilities, we've set a sector target for to help us get to 2050. We very much believe in working with our clients very closely to help them scale up the types of technologies that the Minister was talking about. And to do that, we've committed up to $1 trillion out to 2030 to help our clients with projects, activities, different technologies like the renewable ones we've seen, to help them scale up those. And a good example is actually the Kimal Lo Agire, excuse my pronunciation, HVDC transmission line, 1,500 kilometres, will be the longest in Chile, one of the longest in Latin America. That's something that we're helping to finance at HSBC, so we're really proud of that, and we want to continue to work with customers to accelerate those sorts of projects. I think the other thing that I learnt is that the Chilean system is not too dissimilar from the British one.
Yep.
So a lot of the demand is in the middle, and then you've got renewables at both ends. It's just flipped here where we've got the wind in the north and the sun in the south, obviously, because we're in different hemispheres. But yeah, so we really want to work with all our clients across the whole value chain and across the world. We see that as leveraging our ecosystem is key to rolling out these projects. So really looking forward to exploring some of these topics on the panel. So now we're going to hear 5-minute introductions from our other two panelists, and then we'll get to the questions. So we're going to start with Bernardo.
Thank you very much, Randolph, and congratulations, Minister, for your presentation. Not only this one, but the previous one regarding green hydrogen, which has a lot to do with the debate on this panel, energy. And it's a pleasure, Rafael, to debate with you and that representing a company like Acciona that is doing great things not only in Chile but also in the world in pushing for renewals in our energy matrix. I would like to basically convey four messages that I think are pertinent to the energy debate, which part of it was expressed by the minister. What are the issues that are being debated in the energy sector, both in Chile and worldwide? The first is that I would say that this Manichaean energy divide that separates traditional companies against, let's say, renewable companies, basically no longer makes sense at all. So there are a lot of traditional companies, let's say, doing a lot of investments in renewables. Actually, Colbun, the company that I am vice chairman of the board of, is building the largest wind farm, wind project in not only in Chile but in Latam. 800 megawatts of installed capacity, more than $1 billion investment. It equivalates to 50% of the wind power that's being built in Chile today. The four of the largest companies in Chile are building probably half of the renewable capacity being built in Chile this year and the next. And the pipelines of projects is also very, very well balanced between, let's say, newcomers and companies that has been in the power sector for a long time. So that divide doesn't make sense. That's a first very important message. And another example, we have 92 clients with renewal certificates. So that means that the source of that power is 100% renewal. And that's been growing very strongly every year, you know. We have contracts, PPA contracts on term with the main mining companies. So we are facilitating the process of decarbonization through, let's say, market decisions, you know. So they call for tenders and we compete for those tenders and we win those contracts, and they are 100% renewals. We've been leaders in issuing carbon bonds. We are mitigating a lot of initiatives. The rugby national team in the trip to Europe, it's been mitigated by carbon bonds of Colbun, as well as the Pan American tournament in Chile next month. So what I mean is that a lot of companies, let's say, of the old guard are doing a lot in terms of renewal. And we are in the same boat with newcomers, which are doing also great things in the energy industry in Chile. So that's the first point. And I think that so the debate is not about traditional versus renewals, but the debate is about two ways to see how to basically process and manage risk that are taking place in the transition to a decarbonized economy. And there are two views basically, and that's the second message I want to convey. One view is that risks are better transferred directly through regulatory charges to consumers, and the other view, which is the one I strongly believe, is that the risks are better processed and managed by private enterprises competing in an open market, obviously with a proper regulation. This is a sector that has to be regulated, but still that regulation has to be sensitive to the importance of different companies assuming the risk, managing the risk, and if it goes wrong, well, assume the consequences. If you don't establish that principle, I think it's risky for the long term for the development of the sector. And that's happening in Europe. You know, that graph, the top one, is showing how has changed the spot market price in Europe. So going from, let's say, 50 to 500, and not only that, but also that is affecting prices that customers are paying. So not only you have a very big risk, but that risk is being transferred to customers. So, and that the graph below, the bottom line, which is very stable, is Chile prices. So you see the virtue of having long-term PPAs when power generation companies bear the risks. Obviously, they establish schemes to cover those risks in terms of indexation formulas, in terms of a financial instrument to cover the price risk of natural gas, for instance. You have a very deep financial market if you want to cover that risk, and that's available for everybody. So I would say that the price risk is not easily, but there are a lot of instruments to cover that risk. So it doesn't make sense to transfer that, you know, not to cover it and transfer that directly to customers. So that's my view. So you see that in Europe you have a lot of volatility, and that's been transferred in a very big way to final customers, which is not the case of Chile, which is the bottom line, which is very stable. And so you have some, obviously, price spikes, but nothing to do with Europe. You can see prices moving from, let's say, 100 to 700 euros per megawatt hour. And that's not happening in Chile. So that's why I strongly think that the model that Chile has followed in terms of having long-term PPAs, making power generation companies compete in a market to assume the risk, to bear the risk, to cover them, to manage them, it's a good model. And we shouldn't break that principle when thinking about regulatory evolution going forward. And that's these two views of how to set up a regulatory framework is very pertinent to storage. So storage, you could follow the first route. You can think that storage is part of the transmission network. So basically, companies would invest the capex, they will assume the operating cost, and that's transferred 100% to customers, to consumers. Or you could assume that storage is a service that can be managed by the 150 generation companies that are in Chile now. So look at that number. 150 companies are competing in the generation market today in Chile. So it's a very competitive market. And our view is that storage should be part of that market, you know. And because with storage, you can, let's say, do some price arbitration. If there is zero prices in the north, as it is today, and you have higher prices in the south, well, storage would allow you to deal with that unbalance, and that's something that each player has to basically forecast how much value they can basically capture from storage in the market. But as James said before, storage is not yet cost competitive in terms of market price, so it's not enough to put storage in the market. So maybe, and that's I think is the idea of the changes that will be introduced to the bill, to the transition bill, only the balance that you don't capture from the market would be charged to the consumers. And that's a good combination to speed up storage installation, but keep this market principle of including storage into the basically competition and market. So that's the second message that I want to convey. The third one is that I think that this is very important. We have very ambitious final goals. So we want to be 100% renewal. We want to have a 100% decarbonized economy in year 2050. But more important, the final goals are the different transitions to get there. So are the partial goals and the capabilities and the sort of inputs that are required to get that goal. So for me, that's very, very important. I think if you see the case of Europe, I'm sure that they are sort of having second thoughts of not investing enough in, let's say, backup natural gas facilities, in not having infrastructure to import natural gas instead of relying 100% on Russia. So a lot of things that were decided, I think, in Europe, maybe they would have decided otherwise is if companies would have bared the risk and cope with them and make solutions for for us basically cover those risks. So the volatility you are seeing in Europe is partly because of that, because you could have some alternatives to basically stabilize prices, as we have in Chile. So transitions, partial goals, enabling capabilities are very important. So, and in this sense, I think when I talk about partial goals, I think I'm talking about, let's say, green hydrogen. It's obviously we may think that in year 2040, 2050, Chile may be exporting, I don't know, 20 million tons of in terms of ammonia. But it's much more important to put a different goal, which is basically how many projects in the next 2 years are close to investment decisions. So, and that's why I like to be more concrete when you talk about potential of Chile. You may say that we have 50 projects in different phases of development, but that's, when you talk about projects under development, it's a very big basket, you know, you can put anything there. The real thing is how many projects are in one, to be able to have an investment decision in 1 or 2 years. That should be the goal, and not the sort of dreaming about these millions of projects, you know, navigating around, that none of them has even environmental impact study approved. And according to the previous panel, maybe in year 2024 or 2025, we will have to see the first investment decisions be taken. Otherwise, we will be late. And we still have the whole permitting process, you know, in between. So we have to think about these very concrete, more short-term goals, which obviously have to correlate with a very ambitious long-term road. And the last message I want to convey is that Chile is a great place to invest in renewables, in green hydrogen, and still is. There might be problems today because of the volatility, but the investment being taken by both companies that has been in Chile for a long time and newcomers reflects that it's a very good place to invest. And there is a ranking which is there, you know, just released, but Chile gains some places, you know, so now it's number 14. And to really become the undisputed leader, I think there are some sort of cross-cutting challenges that have to be addressed. And one of those is basically modernizing, expediting the whole permitting process. So if we really want to see final investment decision being taken in 1 or 2 years' time in green hydrogen, in renewable projects, etc., in lithium as well, well, there's no way around but to basically sort of expedite the permitting process. And because, I mean, a few weeks ago, the CEO of Siemens was in Chile, and he told us the following in terms of green hydrogen, for example. You will not be able to compete with the US in terms of subsidies, in terms of tax breaks. That's completely impossible. You will be losing your money if you put that, you know, on the table. You will, and where can you compete? You have the natural resources. You have the competitiveness, so green hydrogen produced in Chile will be competitive in Europe, Japan, and the other markets that will be net importers. But you really have to make a difference in the timeline, in the time for FID. And that's, I think, we have to have a big work on that, because we are not there. We're not there. So if you think that none of the green hydrogen projects is still in the system for getting the environmental permit, and if you assume that an environmental permit would take 10 years, as is taken now for desalination plants, well, you will not get there. You will not see final investment decisions taken in year 2025, 2026. So that's completely essential. We have to offer players not subsidies, because the US is many times what we can do. You have to offer things, expedite permitting processes, and once you get the permit, you have to offer them the sort of rule of law that support that permit. And those two things are not there yet in Chile. So those are my 4 messages that I wanted to convey.
No, that's really good. Thanks, Bernardo. I couldn't agree more on the permitting. That's a common theme that we're hearing globally. You know, all countries are struggling with this, not just for the renewable plants, but for the grids as well. And building out the grid is a huge challenge. Okay. So last but not least, let's hear from Rafael.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation for being here in this Chile Day in London. It's a big pleasure for me to share with the Minister, with my friend and colleague Bernardo, about the Chilean market and the Chilean situation. Let me briefly introduce Acciona Energía as a company. We are a global company just operating renewables. Top 1 green utility in the world today, operating 13 gigawatts, 20 countries, all the clean technologies, wind, solar, biomass, green hydrogen. We are producing today already green hydrogen, supplying 24 terawatt hours, something to feed 30 million people in all the continents, and going to Chile more than 30 years in the country, with more than 6,000 employees, not just in energy, infrastructure, construction, desalinization, water treatment, airport handling, very committed with the country, no doubt, not just the company. Personally, myself, I'm very proud of being Chilean, in all my children. Very committed because we believe in the solidity of the regulatory bodies and the institutional activities in the country. Today, we have invested in the Chilean market 1 billion in renewables. We are not operating just pure renewables. We are carbon neutral 6 years ago, no emission. We are in all the technologies, but our company doesn't have fossil legacy. We are not emitting 1 gram of CO2. Invested in Chile today, 1 billion, and developing more for the future. So let me say that we are also participating in a small, mid-size 10 megawatts electrolysis project in Quintero, another 20 megawatts electrolyzer project in Antofagasta, Mejillones area. And we are part also, the group is part of the Frontera project in Magallanes. It's huge wind project, 1,000 megawatts in order to produce green hydrogen and ammonia to be exported to Europe. So same in offshore. We are developing some offshore project in Chile. Someone can think, okay, the offshore is not the moment, but probably the situation in Chile, I was living in Chile many years, and the situation for the lines is not easy. So probably it's not easy to put the generation close to the consumption. The offshore 10, 15 kilometers from the coast in some areas in the 5th or the 8th region could be easier, high load factor. We are starting with the development of offshore because probably in the life we will see offshore also in the market. But Chile is an island, so there is many islands in the world in terms of energy. Spain is almost an island. And Chile is not having local fossil resources. As an island, is importing all the local resources. And we are living now in the market today a big contradiction. We are importing 20 billions of fossil fuels per year. Let me say better. We are burning 20 billions every year, $55 million each day, burning 20 millions, while at the same time we are not using the full capacity installed in renewables. We are living in a contradiction because we have some disruption or some distortions in the market. Chile today is not an isolated case, same Europe, same Spain, same Germany, in the mistake of depending on a product that Chile doesn't have. It was a mistake in many countries to base the transition in a product that we don't have, that is the natural gas. The case in Chile is the second time. So 20 years ago, we lost all the volume. Today, we increased the cost, but Chile doesn't have gas, and the transition is based in something that we don't have. So we need to do something to avoid or to reduce the dependency. Chile is a very dependent country. To reduce the dependency, there is just one solution: the use of the local energy and natural resources, wind, hydro, solar, hydrogen produced with local green solar or wind or hydro. There is no doubt about no plan B, so no more coal in the future, no more gas in the future, except in the gas producers, no more nuclear, so the only solution is more renewables. Renewables are offering stability of prices, affordability of prices, and clean. So the future is renewable. The discussion is when the future comes. It's a local decision, it's a country decision. It depends of when the country likes to be independent, it depends on when the country likes to be clean. But to burn the money that we don't have, losing renewables that are installed, is a crime under the economical or environmental point of view. We are living today in Chile a very extraordinary situation. I fully agree with Bernardo. The companies are managing the risk. I always say that the most difficult risk to manage is the regulatory risk, because all the rest of the market risk, the companies have tools, financial tools, or PPAs, or many kind of procedures to avoid the risk. But we are not in a normal situation in Chile, and let me talk about 4 points that they are making some distortion in the market. First, delay in lines. More than 7 years of delay in lines. I remember, because I was attending many of the meetings in the road shows 10 years ago, where the Chilean government was looking for investors in renewables, almost promising enough capacity of transmission lines, sufficient transmission lines, and even a nodal market, so with not decoupling. Lines are not there, so we are in an extraordinary situation that we need to resolve. As a consequence, we are wasting renewables that are installed, because 50% of the energy that could be supplied from the north is not arriving to the consumption. Second point that is important, extraordinary price of fuel, of gas, because the war of Ukraine. The Argentina case 20 years ago was extraordinary, and the regulator act, and as a consequence, Chile modified very fast the composition of the energy matrix. Now we are in a complicated situation, because Chile is importing. Chile doesn't have power of negotiation in the international gas market, and is suffering the prices that Chile is not, is a price taker. Let me have a very clear example. Past week in Europe, in an announcement of a failure in a LNG facility in Australia, increased the price in Spain. And Spain never used gas coming from Australia, but is the risk of being in an open international market. And now Chile is suffering a very high price. And this is not a normal situation. This is extraordinary. Third, regulation. There is a case that is not so clear. Renewables are selling the electricity at no price, zero. This is not so clear, because transition means economy, job creation, GDP, but selling at zero is not possible to create jobs. It's not possible to pay salaries. So this is a distortion of the market. Renewables that are making a positive contribution, they are not polluting, they are receiving zero. And fossil plants that they are making a negative contribution in terms of environmental issues, they are receiving the full cost. And the rule globally is who pollute pay, but not the opposites. And let me talk about the fourth distortion, that is dispatching. Maybe we were in the past the coordinator, or the national energy coordinator, or the operator, or the TSO was responsible of the security of dispatching. But now it's not enough. We are living in a trilemma. Trilemma means security, affordability, and clean. So security is not the priority. Probably the priority is a mix in between them, in between the three. And for that, we need to modernize the criteria of the dispatching. Nothing is inflexible in the life. Renewables are not inflexible. Gas is not inflexible. Combined cycle are not inflexible. Even nuclear are not inflexible. So we are in an extraordinary situation with some distortion in the market, and as a consequence of the distortion, the regulator needs to act. When the things are not rolling naturally, it's an obligation of the regulator, it's an obligation of the government, Mr. Minister, to act, to change the rules, to promote a new law. So we are supporting the new law, because if we are wasting renewables, we need storage. If no one is installing storage, the government needs to promote storage. We as a company, we are operating storage. We operate in the biggest battery in Texas, 200 megawatts. We are close to announce a huge deal here in the UK with batteries, a similar market to the Chilean, renewables in the north, wind, consumption in the center, and we are probably next week announcing with the announcement of huge deal in storage. Storage will be part, it's not still cheap, but it's part of it will be in the future, but it's necessary. Solar without storage is nothing. Wind without storage is nothing. Storage has existed always. The coal piles in the coal power stations are storage, or the dams are storage. So we are supporting the necessity of installing storage. There are different cases: regulated tolling, arbitrage, offering ancillary services. It depends on the markets, it depends on the moments. But to start, someone has to push. In our standing, this is the government obligation. This is my intervention by now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. I'm glad you mentioned the energy trilemma. The name of this session is the Power System Conundrum, and I think it goes back to the energy trilemma, trying to balance cost, emissions, and security and resilience of the grid. I think we heard quite a few challenges there around grid, storage, intermittency, etc. I'll go through each of you. What additional solutions? So we've heard what the ministers told us, what the Chilean government's doing to solve some of these issues. What is the key next step, do you think, to solve some of these challenges? Let's start with the minister.
So my time is not up. Now, a couple of things I would say. The key is to find a way of conserving efficient contracts that are now at risk and investing in more storage. I think those are the two pillars for what we need at this moment. I fully agree with Rafael that we need to reduce dependency on fossil fuels. This is a matter of both sustainability, security, and affordability. Clean energy hits the three buckets of the trilemma, especially in a place like Chile, in which we have abundant natural resources, but we have zero capacity for producing fossil fuels. But I mean, transmission lines and linear infrastructure everywhere takes time. I mean, take a look at the last reports by the US, and they are way behind us even. And transmission lines take a lot of time everywhere. Batteries, on the other hand, are modular equipment that it's easier to deploy. And I agree, we have to do better in terms of permitting, especially non-environmental permitting, but at least in batteries, we are doing it. When we launched a month ago, this package of measures to foster the investment in storage, we took care of the permitting, and the deployment of batteries is not going to need to go through the impact assessment for environmental purposes. And the use of public land will be facilitated, so we are working on all those issues. And that's one of the pillars, right? The fostering investment in storage is a critical. We are also creating special rules for payments on capacity, and we hope that, and we are open to discuss how the tender has to work. But I think we will be able to provide a solution in that regard. On this other pillar of conserving existing supply contracts that are efficient to consumers, I think in that I think we have a difference, because I don't think this is a matter of principles. Of course, it has some principles on it. I mean, we can talk a lot about whether this is a symmetrical risk or an asymmetrical risk, and what are the better framework for providing this. I mean, our solution is based on these principles of standard market design that were developed in the US. You can try to build something different from other sources of regulation, but the relevant question here is a very simple one. We have these windfall profits, if you want to put it that way, these congestion rents that are extraordinary, that are of about, in last year, of about $200 million. So you have those congestion rents that are extraordinary. And you have basically two possibilities. You can give it entirely back to consumers, or you can split it between consumers and generators. And the answer to that question is not a matter of principles, it's a matter of evidence. And what we need to see is the cost-benefit analysis behind it. We believe that if you give it entirely to consumers, then you will have some contracts that will be terminated by bankruptcy, and you will have concentration in future bids. And if you add up all those costs, it's about 10 to 15 times more than the cost of the measure. I will be happy to see what your numbers are, because this is not a discussion of principles, this is a discussion of evidence. And if you come up with a cost-benefit analysis that says that this set of policies are more costly than beneficial, then I will be happy to change of horse and find something different. But we did this cost-benefit analysis internally in the ministry, but we also, with external consultant, we find the finest academic experts in order to make this calculation, and we are really sure that that the cost-benefit analysis is properly done. So again, you can try to say that this is a matter of principles, and of course it has some ideology on it, but ultimately it's a very simple question. What do you do with this windfall congestion rents? How do you divide it between customers and generators, and what's the most beneficial way of going about that issue? And I think our solution and the cost-benefit analysis that we made is laying there, and to me is very compelling, at least.
Bernardo.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is to basically produce a correct diagnosis. If you don't have a good diagnosis, you will not have good solutions. And let me briefly touch on that. First of all, Ukraine affects fuel prices. As they were affected at the end of the 2000s, where basically I was the CEO of Colbun, and we have to absorb that price volatility. And we have to negotiate with clients, but there was no value transfer from the clients to the generators. The generators absorb the risk and absorb the consequences of the decision they've taken. And that's when I talk about principle, principle is not a synonym of ideology. The market design has to be set based on principles,
yeah, right.
And that's not ideology. That's nothing to do with principles. So first of all, the price volatility has been always there, due to grain, due to whatever. The price of gas has been higher than the consequence what was the price because of Ukraine, and everybody is dealing with that. You cannot argue that was an exogenous risk that comes from the ceiling, from the I don't know where, exogenous and unpredictable. So always has been the case, and that's why when we enter into contract with final clients, we obviously set up indexation formulas. We go to the financial markets to cover those risks. Who can say that you cannot cover the risk of price volatility of fuels? It's the deepest market in the world, so that's not the case. So volatility of prices of fuels, I wouldn't say it's an exogenous risk. Secondly, renewals are selling at zero. That's not correct, Rafael. Renewals are selling at the price you enter into with clients. The zero cost is the marginal spot price And in any market, when you have a situation of excess supply, no transmission, no capacity to export, let's say, and no capacity to store, the price will be zero. That's economy 1.0. Regardless of if the regulatory framework for marginal spot market, it's cost audited or auctions. We are very happy to enter into that discussion. But you build your projects based on PPAs with final clients, and that's the way you recover your investment. Now, if a company sets up a capacity in one region and enter into contracts in another region, that's a risk that the company is taking. We are not doing that, for instance. Every time we go into a contract with BHP, with Collahuasi, we develop a portfolio of projects around that area, because everybody knows, it's always been known, as you said, Minister, that transmission is lagging behind generation. You cannot assume that this highway is going to be there. Transmission, it doesn't appear, from one day to another. Everybody knows from year 2015, that we will not have enough transmission to evacuate the millions of megawatts installed in the north. So if that signal was there, in all the companies, we would have basically installed renewable capacity all around the country, not concentrated in one area of the country. So that's another risk that some companies took, and some other companies didn't take. So there are 150 companies in Chile competing, and only 3 are arguing that there are not many the ones that receive the monies that will be transferred from clients to these few companies. Only the companies that has a deficit will receive that transfer. In Colbun, we don't have an interest on this discussion, because we will not be benefit nor damage on this discussion about transferring money from the clients to the generation companies. But the companies that will receive this money is only those that has a deficit. Is that a right signal? That companies that have a deficit, will receive, a transfer from the clients? This is not a windfall profit. This is monies that are, by law, that correspond to consumers. It's not that this windfall is being captured by some generators. It's 100% being received by consumers. If you were sort of discussing this regulatory framework ex ante, very happy to enter into that discussion. Maybe it's good to have a mix of some, let's say, risk being transferred directly to customers and some other being absorbed by generators. But this is not the case. You are doing a change afterwards. The risks were taken. So some companies didn't do well, and then you are presenting a bill to transfer some monies from clients. By law, that those monies correspond to clients, that those windfall. And why? Because clients are financing the whole transmission system. If there is money in the transmission business, it has to be captured by clients, by consumers who are financing 100% of transmission systems. So that's why we feel that, again, it's very important for the long term. And actually the model of Chile to have PPAs, which are long terms, which basically allow you to basically invest in projects, to do project financing, it's been basically a reference to the changes in the regulatory framework in Spain, in Brazil. And now here we are saying it's not so good, because maybe it's better to basically quantify the risk and transfer directly to clients. And not always, only when the crisis materialize. Is that a good principle for regulatory design? I think not. I think I'm very clear on this. And that's why we approach the debate from that perspective, saying its system is more healthy. You can basically have the illusion, let's say, of having very low prices, because all the risks were transferred to the clients directly. But you talk to clients. They are paying now $30 in charges last year. Now it's 22. From this, what they call the systemic cost. All these things that are transferred directly to final customers. So they are getting close to the amount they are paying for generation. And that's why they are becoming worried. So Chile it's very important for our mining industry, from our lithium industry, to be very competitive. It's not free, that they are sort of paying charges of $30 of what they call this big bag of, let's say, systemic cost. Because all those are things which are transferring directly to customers. And therefore, that's why I think it's very important to put this place. Maybe this this redirection of these incomes that basically belong to clients, it's not a big thing. Maybe it's transitory, but watch out, you know. So it's very important that companies absorb the risk, process the risk, manage the risk. If they think that the price of gas is going to go up for whatever reason, it's gone up many times in the last 20 years for different reasons, at levels higher than what we've seen today. That's why you have, you know, financial instrument, and we every year in Colbun, we set a policy to cover those price volatility. It's not always perfect. We absorb losses, but in general, in the long run, it makes sense, you know. So that's the kind of thing. I don't want the market for generation to become a fully regulated infrastructure market. That's not good for clients. It's better, you know, for the market in Chile. And you see the result, basically. You see the volatility in Europe and the prices that final clients are paying. It's higher than Chile. Why we want to go in that direction, you know, where many charges are charged directly to clients. And we have a higher share of renewals in Chile. And we've done so, you know, with no subsidies, with no special regulation, with no transferring of risk from generators to consumers once the risk is realized. If you want to make a design ex ante to redistribute risk, that's a great discussion, but not after the risk realized. I think that's not a good principle.
Rafael, I'm not sure where we're at with time, but just quickly.
I don't know exactly how to start, but
I see you furiously writing notes there. What's your view on this risk sharing?
No, that's clear. It's company is responsible of the risk. So we are a public company listed in the Madrid Stock Exchange.
And the risk of a delay in transmission network.
Yeah, but
would you not say that it was foreseen 10 years ago?
This is a political issue. I'm going to go to this point. In terms of managing the risk, all the serious companies have their own system of managing the risk. So we have a very sophisticated tool. We are a company with rating. The rating agencies are asking every month about our contracts. And we have a policy, 80-20, 75-25 of our P50 production needs to be contracted globally. It depends, we are managing the different markets, the different countries, but we have internal rules in order to take our risk under control. And talking about competitiveness, the most expensive price today in the Chilean market are the contracts that are linked to the fossil fuels, because the contracts that are linked to renewables or to the CPI are in the lower prices. But we are in an extraordinary situation that is not new. Probably it was a lack of responsibility of the last government, the last governments, to maintain the open access, don't having transmission. Maybe in order to analyze the curtailment, some kind of first in, first out procedure should be operating, but the situation was, okay, come on, investors, because this is the most attractive market to invest in renewables, but there is no transmission. This is not responsibility of the companies. This is the responsibility of the country, of the government, of the different governments. This is one, the past, and the past, because there were lying or not promising exactly the correct solution. And today, because you agree, when Acciona came to the Chilean market to invest in renewables, 10 years ago, we were the first company going into the market. There was enough transmission for us and for the rest. There are no transmission for the last one, for the company that is coming yesterday. But at the end, when we are talking about curtailment, the curtailment is for everybody. So we need to clarify, because we are suffering an extraordinary situation and we need extraordinary solution. The law is not flexible. It's not written in stone. Let me talk about the congestion rents. Belongs to the consumer the normal level of congestion rents. But with the congestion rents are extraordinary, for the consumer is a windfall profit.
And the consumers?
For the consumer, it is a windfall profit.
Which is a good thing.
I don't know, because for someone could be a windfall loss. So we need to consider that the consumers are receiving a windfall profit, extraordinary, and some companies in the market are having a windfall losses. And let me say about the investment destination. So in the last 2 years, there was a banker here, in the last 2 years, no project financing in Chile. Yesterday, IHS published a list of the